The topic of today's web conference is Policy Matters, Building a Family Engagement System. And on behalf of Harvard Family Research Project, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We will be tweeting throughout and after the conference today, and we encourage you to join us using the hashtag HFRPInteract. My name is Lorette McWilliams, and I'm the moderator for today's web conference. We want this conference to be as interactive as possible, and we invite you to submit questions using the chat pod, which you'll see to the right of the slide. We already have some people chatting, so you'll see some sample text. To enter a question, you'll want to click in the area where the arrow is pointing, type your question, and click Enter. You'll see your question pop up in the main part of the chat pod. While we can't promise to address all of the questions that come in, we will try to get to as many as possible. We've also asked participants to send in questions ahead of time, so we will be addressing those as well. And we'll be having an audience-generated Q&A session a little later on in the conference. The host of our web conference is Heather B. Weiss, the founder and director of Harvard Family Research Project, which started in 1983. She is a senior research associate and lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Heather writes, speaks, and advises on programs and policies for children and families and serves on the advisory boards of many public and private organizations. She's a consultant and advisor to numerous foundations on strategic grant making and evaluation. Now let me introduce today's panelists. Thomas Weber is the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care. He was appointed in September of 2013 after serving as Acting Commissioner. He has served as Undersecretary at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Education, where he oversaw budget and finance, legal, legislative affairs, information technology, policy, communications, and general administration in furtherance of Governor Patrick's education agenda. Tom also served as the Secretary of Education's Principal Advisor for Early Education and Care and was the Secretary's designee to the Board of Early Education and Care. Libby Doggett is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Early Learning in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at the U.S. Department of Education. She heads up the Office of Early Learning within the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, which jointly administers the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge. She works closely with the White House on promoting President Obama's plan to make high-quality, full-day preschool available to all 4-year-olds from low to moderate-income families through a new state-federal partnership. Libby was also the director of the Pew Home Visiting Campaign and directed Pre-K Now, a 10-year campaign to advance high-quality, voluntary pre-K for all 3- and 4-year-olds. Kent Mitchell is the Vice President for Outreach and Partnerships at Early Learning Indiana. He partners with other team members on partnership, outreach, and federal grant efforts. With a background in public policy, he has previously worked with Senator Edward M. Kennedy, the Pew Charitable Trusts, and the Corporation for National and Community Services Social Innovation Fund. Today's conference, Policy Matters, Building a Family Engagement System, will examine the connections between family engagement policy and practice, with a focus on early childhood education and the elementary years. The conference will also provide examples of system building at the state level from the public and private sector perspectives, and it will examine strategies to promote equitable family engagement anywhere, anytime children learn. A common thread throughout today's discussion is that family engagement is core to strengthen children's learning anywhere, anytime, and to promote educational equity. We are thrilled that these panelists can join us today, and we anticipate an interesting and informative discussion. I'm going to turn this over now to Heather to give us some framing and grounding for today's discussion.
Thanks, Lorette. My thanks to all of you presenting and participating for joining us today. And I'd like to thank Lorette and others at HFRP for all the work that you've done to put this webinar together. It's coming at a particularly opportune time. I suspect many of you, like those of us at HFRP, are eagerly tracking the discussion on ESEA, Federal Education Legislation Reauthorization, to see what's happening with respect to family engagement and early childhood. All children deserve a high-quality education that begins in the earliest years and continues through secondary and even into higher education. We know that family engagement predicts children's school readiness and school success. It's a worthwhile investment for both the public and the private sectors. Family engagement is essential to the success of any education reform effort from early childhood through the school years. Whether ensuring children's readiness for school, supporting grade-level literacy, promoting a growth mindset, and some of the other characteristics that encourage learning, families play a key role in supporting and advocating for their children and for all children. With growing disparities and inequities with respect to access to quality learning opportunities in and out of school, it's all the more important now that families have access and opportunities to be meaningfully engaged in their children's learning and development. We know from a great deal of research that family engagement matters through a variety of different processes, and I want to outline a couple of them. We know that warm, nurturing, responsive parenting is related to school readiness. We know that the type of support for learning that parents provide in the home and in the community, like getting books from the library and reading, singing songs, and many other efforts, are related to higher levels of school readiness. We know from the evaluation of many interventions that we can impact parents' knowledge, abilities, and skills to support their children's learning and development in elementary through high school and beyond. And finally, we know that family engagement remains a very important predictor of kids' school grades, that it closes achievement gaps and improves average literacy performance between children of more and less educated mothers. So again, there's a great deal of research that supports the importance of family engagement. As practitioners plan and implement family engagement, they're looking for effective approaches and equitable access to family engagement opportunities. Random, piecemeal family engagement efforts that lack an intentional connection to student learning and developmental goals will not have a lasting impact on students. Systemic, integrated, and sustained family engagement in kids' learning is essential for impact, and that's where policy comes in big time. So today we have two big questions that we're going to be looking at. How does a state build a system of family engagement, and how can federal policy support the development of this system? To help answer these questions, we're fortunate to have with us today three educational leaders who've used their positions to create dramatic and transformational changes in the way we approach and implement family engagement. Commissioner Tom Weber of the Massachusetts Department of Early Childhood Education and Care has been a real state innovator. He's leveraged the federal Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant to the state to create a strong infrastructure for family engagement that includes strategic partnerships for family engagement across multiple learning spaces, professional development, family engagement quality standards for center-based programs, family child care, and after school, so both in and out of school learning environments, and a network of providers across the state that directly work with families. We know from our work with Head Start and others that frameworks are an important tool to help us navigate complexity and build integrated and sustained family engagement across all learning environments. They help us focus on what's important and what to think about and consider when we plan a systemic and sustained system. Libby Doggett from the U.S. Department of Education, a long time, as you know, expert on early childhood and family engagement, will describe the department's dual capacity building framework for family engagement. This framework underscores the organizational conditions and processes for effective family engagement implementation and relationships with families. We also know the private sector plays an important role too, especially when in partnership with the public sector, it can create major and sustainable changes. Kent Mitchell from Early Learning Indiana, a United Way agency, shows us how a grant from the Lilly Endowment of $20 million is spurring a statewide effort to boost the quality of early childhood and, in addition, to build in a robust, integrated, and sustainable family engagement strategy within early childhood across the state. The plan that he's developing with his colleagues is to build family engagement in from the earliest years through the transition to school and into the early elementary years. While Massachusetts' journey has lessons learned from 5 years of the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Grant implementation, the lessons from Early Learning Indiana, are early. Kent is going to talk to us about what it takes to plan a strategy and some of their thinking about how they're going to implement it with this strong commitment to family engagement. With this, I'd like to turn it back to Lorette so we can hear from our panelists about how to build family engagement systems with support from state and federal policy.
Great. Thanks, Heather. So while Tom is turning briefly a background, Massachusetts was one of the first states to receive a Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Grant, which is a discretionary grant for states to innovate, build, and support a statewide system of high-quality programming for children with high needs so that all children enter kindergarten ready to succeed. Hi, Tom. Up. Unmute your speakers, Tom.
Thank you, and we'll get clear of the first technical difficulty of the afternoon. Sorry to have contributed to that.
I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you very much, Lorette, and thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Heather, for that overly kind introduction. I often get the benefit of getting credit for work that's being done by the good folks here at my agency as well as folks across the state. But this is an area of work that I'm very, very passionate about, and I'm very excited that the Harvard Family Research Project has identified this as a topic. It is certainly worthy of exploration, and it's worthy of further expansion. So thank you very much for bringing this up today, and it's a pleasure to be on a panel with Libby and with Kent. We here in Massachusetts consider this to be a real core part of our work. Obviously, a lot of attention is given to formal early education and care programs, and that's important and it's essential, but we're really mindful that we have about 1.4 million children ages 0 to 14 in the Commonwealth, and our department provides subsidy support to a little less than 60,000 of those children. So there are so many families and so many children that we're not reaching through formal early education and care programs. And so by emphasizing the importance of family and community engagement, we're effectively recognizing that while formal care is important and it's a discrete opportunity to impact children for a single year, we know that families are with children for their lifetime. They're in it for the long run. So this is a real opportunity for us to leverage and to build capacity within that support system and take full advantage of that, because it's a big gap within our system and it helps us fill that space between where we are and the goal of universality that we really want to meet. So we were the beneficiaries, you noted, of a Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant, and our coordinated family and community engagement work was an essential component of the strategy that we laid out in the Early Learning Challenge. There really were sort of 3 essential ingredients to that. One is that we wanted to establish a common framework and a common language around family and community engagement. We wanted to target, obviously, high-need students so that we could have the greatest impact. And we wanted to build capacity across the field, and we really started to think about the field in a broad way to ensure that we were getting beyond just what the agency could do and just what our field of formal early educators could do, and began to leverage other important assets that families were already engaged in. So when we think about those partnerships, the key partnerships for us were, 1, establishing a network of coordinated family and community engagement grantees. We have statewide coverage. 100% of our communities now have access to a local coordinated family and community engagement grantee to support their access to high-quality early learning opportunities and resources. We have provided a robust set of trainings to build capacity within those CFCE grantees, as we call them, but also through our partnerships with state agencies, our Department of Public Health, our Department of Children and Families, the Children's Trust Fund in Massachusetts, the Department of Mental Health, agencies that already have a core mission to support, in particular, high-needs families, but weren't really engaged in an effort that was formally targeting or more directly targeting families in the manner in which we knew that we could reach them. So we started, as I said, by establishing a common framework for this, and for that purpose we settled on the Strengthening Families Protective Factors as our framework. And as a substantive matter, the Commonwealth's early learning standards and guidelines. And those are really the foundational elements of our work. And in working in partnerships with our state agencies and with a community of providers, museums, and libraries, those CFACE grantees, we've really been able to have an impact reaching tens of thousands of families that we otherwise were not reaching and having a real measurable benefit in that outreach. So this has been a big opportunity for us, and we've been really excited about it. And I can say with candor, it's been the most exciting part of the work that I've been part of here at the department. Again, we're proud of the improvements that we've been able to make in formal early education and care, but this has really enabled us to get to a large number of children who we weren't previously reaching in the manner that we needed to reach and with a quality and depth that we weren't previously providing.
Great, thank you, Tom. It's very exciting to hear 100% of all districts have access. That is exciting news. Thanks so much. We're going to move to a poll before our next panelist. And our first poll question is, does your district use Title I funds to support early childhood education programs? You'll just take a minute to select your answer. Okay. Interesting. And as the numbers trickle in, you may know that Title I funds can be used to support children starting at their birth, well before they enter kindergarten. And that can include providing pre-K programming. And currently, just a small percentage of children who are eligible are supported with Title I funds prior to entering kindergarten. But the recent draft bill, the ESEA draft bill released by Senators Alexander and Murray, expressly states that providing early education programs is a permissible way to use Title I funds. We will now move to Libby Doggett from the U.S. And as Libby turns on her web camera, I will briefly introduce in 2014, the U.S. Department of Education launched a dual capacity building framework to guide states and school districts in building a system of family engagement. Libby Doggett is here to walk us through the elements of that framework. Hi, Libby.
Hi, Lorette, and hi, Heather, and Tom, and Ken. I'm delighted to be on a panel with you, and thanks to everybody who's joining us from around the country. This is a great way for all of us to learn and to share good ideas. My major goal here is to tell each of you that the Department of Education really values family and community engagement, and that our goal is to do more at the national level and to provide even better backup for states and local communities as well to assure that families and communities are effectively engaged in all aspects of their children's learning. I want to give a shout out to our strong working group at the Department of Education led by Vicki Myers, but we have some incredible members. Carrie Jasper has been doing this for a long time, Monique Troussant, Brenda Gordon-Mitchell and her whole staff at the Faith and Community based or community engagement office have been so helpful in this. We don't want family and community engagement to be any one person's job. We want everybody at the department to own this and to integrate this into their work. So that's going to take some work on our part, and we're hard at it. Heather called me an expert on family and community engagement. I don't consider myself one, but then I think, well, I have run home visiting programs, and I have been a teacher, and I have been a parent, and now a grandparent, and engaged in schools. I had a wonderful experience the other night in Louisville, where I got to go to a wonderful family engagement night put on by the National Council of Family Learning, which is headquartered there in Louisville, but works all over the country. And they were working with the McPherson Preparatory Academy there, and had over 50 parents come in and kids, and they all had dinner, and then they had an incredible woman, Star, read a book on Pete the Cat. And the children were so engaged, and the parents were watching how to read a book, and then they all went around to a number of centers to learn how to sequence activities and act them out. And then, of course, the kids left with that book. And I can really see how those children are getting prepared to enter kindergarten really ready. So it was pretty exciting to see that great activity. As you know, and on the screen there is a commitment from our boss, Arnie Duncan. And last spring, we released the new dual capacity family engagement. I can't even say it right. I call it the dual capacity family engagement framework. And we want you to know that Arnie is for this, the Secretary's behind it, we're behind it, we're working to make it real. If you'll move to the next slide, I think you'll see that in order for kids to have the best instructional practices, there's what we consider 5 essential supports. And they're there in front of you, which are, professional capacity. Obviously, leadership is really important. Focus on instruction, a really great climate there in the school. And then that other one that is really important is what we're talking about today, which is parent and community engagement. We think that's incredibly important. I don't think there's anything that schools can do without the support of families. It will be much more effective if families are intricately involved and engaged. If you go to the next slide, there it is, and that is our new framework. And I don't want you to think of this as a blueprint. It's not going to give you a step-by-step guide to how you implement family and community engagement. It is really a compass, something for you to look at, to absorb. Karen Mapp designed it. We have adopted it. And every time I look at it and think about it, I learn something new. But you see the challenge. The big thing is, in the past, we kind of expected staff to know how to do this, and we expected parents to know how to be engaged. And I think what we've realized is that families and staff at schools need to develop their capacities to partner. And so that's what this framework does. And it talks about the opportunity conditions, and they're very well laid out there, and then the policy and program goals, and then actually what this looks like. And I think, if you think about parents, and particularly parents nowadays, they're so very, very busy. They're challenged. It's a difficult world. We need to be able to recognize that they might all be engaged in different ways and respect that, but they all want what's best for their kids. So we hope that you will study the framework, will use the framework, adopt it, and then take it to the next step. And meanwhile, we'll be working at the federal level to provide you more and more support. And we hope you will adopt what we have adopted, which is not having any one person own this, but having everybody own this, because family and community engagement is everybody's job. So thank you all very much for doing this webinar today.
Great. Thank you, Libby. And you're right. We believe it's a shared responsibility. Thanks. We are going to move now to a second poll. And our second poll question is, how effective are family-school partnerships in your school or school district? Please select your answer, and we should see results in just a moment. Okay. Interesting. Okay, and it is now time for us to turn our attention to Kent Mitchell from Early Learning Indiana. And as Kent starts his web camera, Early Learning Indiana has a 100-year history of serving young children and families in the state. It is just beginning to embark on a statewide strategy for high-quality early childhood education in which family engagement is a priority. Kent Mitchell will be sharing with us the steps that his organization is taking to implement a system of family engagement. Hi, Kent.
Hi, how are you? Good.
Hi, good.
Great.
Thanks
Thank you, Lorette,
us.
and thank you, Heather, and thanks to the other panelists. Like Heather said, we're at the very early stages of this process, but having heard what I've just heard from other speakers, so excited that we have made this a priority in our statewide work and here in Indiana. A little bit about Early Learning Indiana. We are a nonprofit organization based in Indianapolis with a big, bold mission to ensure that all kids in Indiana have high-quality early learning opportunities. Like's been mentioned, for 115 years, we have directly operated centers. We're the largest nonprofit, non-Head Start operator in the state. We serve 1,200 families every year across 10 centers. We also operate Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships Network. We also operate the largest child care resource and referral agency in the state of Indiana called Child Care Answers. But I'll spend most of my time talking about our Lilly Endowment funded project, which again is a new project to work statewide to build capacity, build the better early childhood system here in Indiana. We early on identified family engagement as a really critical component, and there were so many reasons for us to do that. One important one, of course, has been mentioned, the research base, and we've learned more and more about that from Heather and from the Harvard Family Research Project and others, how important, how strong the research base is around family engagement. We also know that it's probably our best sustainability strategy, that our ability to work with families is probably going to sunset after 5 years on this initiative because it's philanthropically funded. So we know, but we know that every investment we make in parents could last a lifetime, so it's very important for that reason. It also allows us to find common ground, we found, with our K-3 partners and business partners in the state. Even if you're not familiar with the intricacies of early childhood, you deeply understand and immediately get the importance of authentically engaging families. And finally, I want to say that there has been just tremendous work in the state already by other people on family engagement. So we're at a very important tipping point where we're looking to build family engagement more into our quality rating and improvement system, path to quality. We have a new family engagement framework that's been adopted by the state. Folks have mentioned the importance of that. That has opened up a whole new world of possibilities for us. And we're in the process, our Department of Education here, of updating our early learning standards called the Foundations. And for all those reasons, we chose to focus on family engagement. And we had a very particularly powerful moment, and I'm sure many others have had this experience in one of our strategy sessions, which can be quite dry, asking folks, we had a consultant ask folks to close their eyes, think of the most powerful early childhood experience or an early learning experience they had. And 9 out of 10 folks mentioned their parents, mentioned their caregiver, family member, and the importance of something that they did in a moment in time to advance them on a great trajectory in life. And so we think that's a great strategy to showcase to people who may not be convinced the importance of family engagement. We knew we couldn't do this alone. We wanted to find a research institution in the state who had already been researching this, looking at the quality of programs. So we have partnered with Indiana University, a great research institution there, to help us look at the data around family engagement in Indiana. So we asked them to look at child care search data, at Path to Quality, again, our QRIS, and how well family engagement is embedded. They talked to 30 programs all across the state and had them look at the framework that the state adopted and see how well they were doing, where they wanted to get better. They looked at the systems level, and we also did a needs assessment. So to understand the position of families, economic, demographic, et cetera, we know context matters more than anything when engaging families, so we wanted to be sure to do that. We also engaged Heather and Elena, and they have been, Elena Lopez from Harvard Family Research Project, have been essential in pushing us harder to elevate family engagement as a conversation topic, to review and comment on ideas that we have, and to connect us to others. So again, thanks to Harvard Family Research Project. I think they're a great partner for any state working on this kind of work. I want to say up front a couple other things about our process. One is we're looking at a number of areas, not just family engagement, but quality improvement, capacity building, workforce development, to name a few. And what we've asked each of those folks doing that work, research for us, is to always put family engagement front and center. How can families help build capacity in programs? How can families help with retention of the workforce? We know the application of family engagement cuts across so many areas, and we've specifically tasked and really been very diligent about asking folks to ask those kinds of questions. I also want to say, and whether it was the right decision or not, we made a decision in our process not to go out and do a lot of conversations with families. That has been a component of different parts of our reconnaissance so far, but we wanted to wait until we had something more specific to ask them and a better and more authentic way to engage families. We wanted to get to know communities better, and so the next phase of our work is to continue our work in communities, have more conversations with families, and do what I think Heather has called design thinking, and Elena, to really co-construct with families. And that's an important principle of our family engagement strategy, that co-construction piece with families, with teachers, with partners, and with communities. And other important principles that we're operating under, embedding family engagement in existing work. We've learned from our research it cannot be an add-on. It has to be authentically integrated into what's happening in early childhood and into the experiences and life contexts of families. We want to promote experimentation. All the answers are not out there, although the research base is strong, and we know that we can promote experimentation. That will be effective. And finally, we need to remove barriers. We need to remove biases, negative perceptions, other things that could inhibit greater family engagement. I want to give a flavor of some of the projects, specific interventions and projects we're thinking about on a statewide basis, and these will change. Again, we're at the early part of our exploration, but I wanted to name a number of them. One is to work through AmeriCorps to embed human capital into 15 programs in 3 different parts of our state, the 3 biggest cities in our state, to actually work and experiment around family engagement. So embedding somebody who's dedicated to that work in high-quality early childhood programs. Second, others have mentioned focusing on professional development and training around family engagement, doing that across different systems and settings, working on attendance. We think that's a very important piece of family engagement to make sure that families are there, children are there. And we know it's also important to our K-3 partners who see chronic absenteeism. And we know if we work on that early, hopefully we can have an impact on those that outcome later on. We want to connect model programs. We found that they work in isolation. Even if they're doing model family engagement work, they're not connected to one another, and they're not connected to their communities. We want to elevate family voice in our own project and in the work of others. Making linkages with home visitation, 10,000 plus families in home visitation, many more than that in Indiana. How do we connect that work and transfer the trust building that happens there into family engagement more broadly? Working on transition. 70% of families nearly in Indiana have 2 parents in the workforce. Hundreds of thousands of kids are in formal or informal care, and when they enter kindergarten, often so much is lost about what they've learned, how they've been impacted. How do we transfer that knowledge? What message does it send to families that we don't do that? That's the wrong message, so how do we fix and repair that? A texting project which allows us to reach some scale in the state, providing developmentally appropriate messages from teachers, actually, to parents, engaging them in their child's education beyond, again, anytime, anywhere learning. We know that happens anywhere, so a text project can assist with that. And finally, and Heather has keyed us into this, the need to promote experimentation and creativity. I think it's very likely we'll have an open competition to generate ideas and use small dollar amounts to generate creativity and innovative ideas around family engagement. We think that will be very powerful. So in conclusion, I just want to say our hopes here, our aspirations at the beginning of this process are to elevate the issue of family engagement, to partner with others, especially our State Department of Education and our Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning, and to partner with them to do great work in the community and with community partners, and to leverage new funding or redirect it to family engagement. There might be better uses of resources, and we think family engagement might be one of them. So again, I want to thank Harvard Family Research Project, thank Heather, and thank the other panelists.
Great. Thank you, Kent. You've got a lot of exciting work and a lot of exciting plans in Indiana. We're going to move to a poll, our final poll. And our question is, does your state have a policy that connects family engagement with early education learning goals for students? Okay. All righty. Move to the moderated Q&A. And I'm going to turn this over to Heather and our presenters.
Hi, this is Heather, who I think Kent has generously described as a nudge with respect to family engagement, which would actually be an accurate, probably, characterization. But I think, like everybody who's on this webinar presenting and participating, we all have a passion for this work, and both feel it in the heart but also feel it in the head, in the sense that there really is very strong research base that family engagement is one of, if not the most important predictor of kids' learning and development. So this is an easy one to, I think, to feel passionate about. So with that, I want to ask our panelists a couple of questions. The first is around capacity building. We know there's growing interest in family engagement. I think several of our presenters have said there is a fair amount going on within their states and within the nation. And we know we need to be probably linking people and also building their capacity. So we have a set of questions around capacity building. How does your organization build the capacity of communities, individuals, and other organizations to really promote systemic, strength-based, and sustainability is a key thing, family engagement? So for Tom and Kent, what have been some of the successes and challenges in capacity building in your states to promote this systemic, strength-based, and sustained family engagement? Tom, if you want to tee off, and then Kent, if you would follow, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you very much, Heather. Well, this is obviously where the rubber meets the road, and capacity building has been an essential component of our work. First, we obviously want to start by measuring where our partners are, and it was important, as I said earlier, that we establish a common framework and a common language. And so we established early on that we were going to use the Strengthening Families Protective Factors as that common framework to establish between our agency, the Department of Early Education and Care, and our sister agencies at the Department of Public Health and the Department of Children and Families, a common approach to how we're going to go through this work. So that was part of the approach that we took in engaging interagency collaboration. But furthermore, you know, we have obviously 10,000 formal early education and care providers that we wanted to engage in a very serious way. I think Kent put it best earlier when he said there has to be authentic engagement and it needs to be embedded in the work. And so we've done that through our quality rating and improvement system. It is one of the 5 core premises of the QRIS here in Massachusetts. But beyond the family and community engagement being its own discrete independent component of QRAS, we've ensured that it's embedded as well in the curriculum requirements, the health and safety requirements, our workforce requirements, and the leadership requirements within QRAS. So we're able to leverage our existing formal system of early education and care in these efforts. We've also wanted to reach out more directly to families, and so we've built up resources that are going to be with us for the long term and are going to be with us beyond just the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant that expires in December. We've built up web-based resources through a partnership with WGBH, which is our PBS network here in Massachusetts, and we've similarly built up resources through our Museums and Libraries project, which has been led by the Boston Children's Museum, but we're now partnering with museums and libraries across the Commonwealth. So that's been a big part of our capacity building. The challenge has been, as I said, we're working with the entire field and we're working with a number of diverse partners. And so the foundations weren't strong to begin with, and we needed to, in establishing that common language and a common approach, make sure that we trained up to do that. And I think what we recognized early on is that there was an extensive amount of training necessary in order to empower people to do this work at a high level. And that was a principal challenge, and we adopted quickly a train-the-trainer model, and so I think we've been effective in leveraging that model, but I think that's something that people need to be mindful of as they undertake these efforts themselves.
Ken?
Great, thank you, Tom. Yeah, I just want to mention a few things in here. A lot of this work has been done by our state partners, particularly FSSA, our Family and Social Services Administration. We just enacted public funding for pre-K in Indiana, and there has been great efforts over the last year to figure out ways to identify and communicate with low-income families who would be eligible for those programs. And so I think that's just an example where, you know, we're a bit behind from other states, but where we're seeing just how small investments in being able to communicate with families and understand what they want to hear and reach out to them has been very powerful. We also partnered with a couple other state partners on capacity building grants specifically around our pre-K, new pre-K programs called On My Way Pre-K. Now that is an actually example where I think there was a bit of a challenge there, where there was guidance that family engagement was an opportunity to receive a grant for and invest in to facilitate pre-K, but few programs chose to do that. They chose to invest in other things, and I just think it speaks to the importance of, even though you list it as a priority, even going a step further and pointing out how important it is and opening up the field again to the possibility of choosing that over other high priorities. In terms of other successes, I think we mentioned the state adopted a new family engagement framework. They're working to embed that in path to quality. I commend programs because with the new public pre-K, they're agreeing to be evaluated on how well they do family engagement, and that's going to share a lot and tell us a lot. We already have some early indications that's an area of work for programs, and I think that they're agreeing to be evaluated will tell us any more, so I commend programs here. So we have a lot of evidence-based family engagement programs in Indiana. There's Family Partnership, Raising a Reader, and others, so those are some successes. I think, again, some of the challenges, figuring out how to partner with families authentically, figuring out how to partner with communities on this, addressing, like I said, again, negative perceptions or barriers that could inhibit strong family engagement, and continuing to work with our Department of Education, our local school districts, local schools, finding ways to align what they do and what we do in the more community-based early childhood space, and figuring out how to align around those goals, because ultimately we share that same goal of success for that young child and for that family.
Thank you, Ken. Libby, how do you see federal policy assisting states in facilitating capacity building and kind of building some of the kinds of successes that our other panelists have described, and maybe addressing some of the challenges?
Sure. Well, I was interested in the poll around Title I because we do want to make sure that everybody knows that you can use Title I funding for preschool, and also there is a set-aside, up to 1%. 1% is the minimum that states can use for family engagement. We'd like to see that increased, but there is funding around for family engagement there. And we've seen some really good uses of that, particularly more recently. I think we're getting away from the episodic family engagement that hasn't been as effective toward more meaningful family engagement where families are engaged around student learning or child learning. So one of the great ways we've seen the use of Title I funding is actually seeing data shared with families and bringing families in so that they can learn to look at their child's data and understand what it means, and then going home with some specific ideas of things they can do at home to help their children. Obviously, leadership engagement is really important, not just at the school, so that schools can partner better, but also with families. Families want to develop those skills. I think we haven't talked about Head Start, but Head Start in early childhood has a particularly strong model of family engagement, and we need to look at that and learn from that, and particularly around leadership engagement, I think. Recently, with Ann Henderson, we had a training or info session for our staff in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, and we had a school, some staff person, come in from Stanton Elementary School. They're using Title I funds, and they also have funds from the Flamboyant Foundation, lucky them, and what Flamboyant is funding is actual home visits for the teachers and for every child in the classroom. And when we heard Melissa Bryant, this incredible teacher, talk about that school, she went to the school to help turn it around. In the first year, they thought they were doing everything right, and they didn't see a lot of difference. And then the second year, they got the help from the Flamboyant Foundation and did these home visits. And of course, she describes this much better than I could, but was really puzzled about, what is this? How is this going to make a difference? And then saw immediately, as she got to know the families in their own home, on their own terms, see where the kids lived, got to know their siblings and the rest of their family and their dogs and see where they're sleeping and their toys. It really made a huge difference. And it made a difference in the way that school approached families and it turned that school around. It was actually the piece, a lot of other pieces involved, but it was the key piece that did turn the school around. So I think we know what to do. Now we really just need to figure out which of these pieces each of these schools can do.
Great, thank you. I have another question for all of you. First, I think for Tom and Ken, and then Libby, if you would add your thinking to it, it would be great. And that's really the question that we began with, and that's how can federal and state leaders make family engagement a priority? You all have your examples of a federal leader and 2 state leaders that have made it a priority. Can you talk about your advice to others, both to people that want to encourage their leaders to do this, and what you would also say to other state and federal leaders about the importance of this so they really make a commitment to it, to build it, to sustain it? Any thoughts you have on this would be great.
Heather, the first suggestion that I would have is that it really does need to be embedded into the mission statement of all of the relevant state agencies. It's very explicitly laid out in the Department of Early Education and Care's mission statement, and therefore it's part of our strategic plan as approved by the board. So it's something that is constantly on our radar, and we need to be attentive to in a very robust way. And so I think when you're looking across all state agencies, you need to keep it front and center. But as a practical matter, I think it needs to be reflected in the important opportunities that are connected to funding and resources. And so it needs to be very explicitly recognized as a criteria and very explicitly rewarded as a funded opportunity within every occasion that we can take. I think from the federal and state level, as we look at early intervention and home visiting, as we look at mental health services, as we look at our efforts around homeless families, we need to think about how important and central authentic family and community engagement is within that process. So as these funding opportunities come forward and as we lay forward our strategic visions for our work, this needs to be explicitly referenced.
This is Ken. I'd echo that. Having come from public policy in Capitol Hill, having those clear, specific opportunities, whether in state policy or in federal, to explicitly work on family engagement in communities, in schools, and community-based settings. That's just critical. Something that I've been thinking a lot about, a little more experimental. I think that first touch that a family has with formal education, whether it's in early childhood or pre-K or kindergarten, is extremely important. And how do we and how can policy make that experience, that consumer and user experience, engaging for the family, set expectations for them, whether it's a family using a subsidy for early child care or their first touch in a pre-K program. I think all levels can work on that, and that can be linked to policy as well. And then finally, just expanding funding for evidence-based programs like Early Head Start that have strong family engagement. It's so critical that we support and continue to advocate for programs like that.
Thank you. Libby?
I just want to add one thing, because I totally agree with Kent and Tom. I mean, we've got to show people that this works, and we have good research. I don't know that we've made a clear enough case and shown our policymakers that it works. I think the reason we have made great advances in early childhood is we have finally gotten enough of the policymakers to see that it works, and we've now got to do the same with family engagement. We have to show them that when Kent's model is fully implemented in a couple of years, what a difference it's made. And, as Tom looks at what's happened with Race to the Top, he can really point to what a difference it's made there in Massachusetts. So we're going to have to make sure that we lift up the successes that we're having and get them into the hands of policymakers who will drive this and make it a part of everything we do.
Great, thank you. So we've asked each of our presenters to provide us with a main takeaway or lesson that they've learned from today. And I want to quickly start with mine, which is, I think, the phenomenal importance of leadership that then builds collective leadership and partners and networks, family engagement across states and the community. So when I think about leadership, it is collective leadership, it is partnering and networking so that we reach that tipping point where we've got effective practice supported by policy that is rewarding, financing and rewarding, and holding our efforts, to account. So it's a long takeaway, but I think it's a set of things that need to come together with strong leadership that then are maybe going to take us to the next level. Libby, would you like to reflect on your main takeaway?
Sure. Well, there are lots of them, and I always learn from Harvard Family Research Center and my colleagues, so I've learned a lot. I actually am sitting here very excited to see that what Race to the Top is doing around family engagement. I'd read about the great brief on what is happening in Massachusetts, but it's exciting to see that's working. And I guess I'm coming away more with a to-do list and thinking we need to look at every one of the states in Race to the Top and pull out the great practices, not just in Massachusetts, but in other states. And then, of course, I'm very, very excited to see what's happening in Indiana. Every time we see a state move from no pre-K to some pre-K and to have the strong leadership of Kent there, and to see that they're starting it not just talking about preschool, but really talking about family and community engagement and what a difference that can make, and kind of building it on that. I think that's exciting. And then I just go back to the Department of Education and think we have a long way to go and that we need to get going, because I just feel reaffirmed in the direction that we're headed. So thank you all very much for sponsoring this.
Thank you, Libby. And Tom, last word here on the takeaways.
You might need to unmute your speaker, Tom.
As Libby said, I've learned a lot in the course of this, and I'm very excited about what I've heard today. What I would say is that it obviously underscores the emphasis that we've been putting on the necessity of partnerships to leverage the resources within those partnerships, but also to make sure that we are, in fact, connecting to the high needs populations that we want to reach first. It's also important from a standpoint of sustainability, because a big part of our long-term plan in Massachusetts is to build on the partnerships that we've created through the Early Learning Challenge. And without those partnerships, this work wouldn't be sustainable beyond the 4 years of that grant. And in building those partnerships, we've effectively created a huge network of advocates on behalf of this work. And so as we discuss the necessity of making sure that policymakers are aware of the importance and the value of the work that we're doing, we've really established a strong advocate network here through this work and through this extension of partnership. And the final point I would say is something that Libby has already underscored, which is that data is just essential. And this is an area of work that is not easy to quantify or as easy as we might wish it to be. So we really have to work hard to make sure that we're making the most of the data available to us and leverage that as part of our advocacy efforts.
Thank you.
Great. Generated Q&A section. And for those, if you are just joining us, we invite you to submit questions using the chat pod, which you'll see to the right of the slide. We encourage your participation. To enter a question, you'll just click in the area where the arrow is pointing, type in your question, and click Enter. You'll see your question pop up in the main part of the chat pod. We've also taken questions during registration, as well as during this event. And we've had some great questions come in, like this one. So, Libby, I'm going to direct this one to you. What kinds of research is still needed in order to continue to inform the formulation of sound family engagement policies?
Well, I think there's a huge need for research. We know the research about that family engagement works and the effects it has, but now we need to dig deeper and go to the next level of who does it work best for. And I think we need to now, we want to get beyond the episodic, the more, the lighter touch family engagement and into the deeper ways of engaging families. And so we need a little bit of research on how to do that. I always worry also about the families we're missing and want to make sure that we're not just engaging the ones that are easier to engage, but how do we really reach the very difficult to reach families? Because I firmly believe, and I know all of you share this, that we want, every family wants what's best for their child. So we want to do that. And then I think we need some research on technology. Obviously, we're using technology today to great advantage. And are there some ways that I know schools are working on this. I see it all the time, but I'd like to have more research on how is technology really driving this. So there's a lot of research still needed. Those are just a few of the many, many areas that I think we need to look at.
Thank you. I agree. Technology is an interesting avenue in thinking about families and family engagement. Heather, did you have something to say? No? No. Ken, I was wondering, sort of related to that, what were the most helpful research studies and resources used when you were developing your plan for Indiana?
Thank you for the question. There were a number that were pretty influential. I think one is we were also developing our AmeriCorps program. There was a meta-analysis, I think it was MDRC, that was talking about the importance of engaging families with respect to literacy and early math outcomes. And I believe that's a study, and it was very comprehensive and very, very helpful because it was very targeted and allowed me to make the case in that application and in other settings about the practical importance in terms of child outcomes of this work. So that was very powerful. I think the work that Child Trends has done, and a lot of that's been federally funded in Maryland, and maybe some with Harvard, has been very influential to my own thinking because it was so thoughtful, looking at the population of families and doing in-depth discussions and conversations and focus grouping with families. So it taught me, and I think we're going to try to replicate that here later, how to do that kind of work authentically. Finally, of course, the Head Start research is very important in those frameworks. And Heather has keyed us into Tony Brike's work around the importance of parental engagement in school reform and turnaround, and I think that has a lot of power. And so she's used it in multiple settings in our process, and we'll continue to use it here in Indiana.
Excellent. And Tom, did you have any particular research that you felt was very helpful or resources when you were developing your application and planning for the Race to the Top?
Sure, absolutely. As I've already referenced, obviously the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework. But in addition to that, the Brazelton's Touch Points approach has been integral to what we've been doing. Karen Mapp's body of work has been essential. And we built, obviously, from our pre-K Common Core standards here, or what's known as our curriculum framework in Massachusetts, as well as our early learning guidelines. So those were really the essential components to our plan.
Okay. I'm going to switch directions just briefly. I have some questions from the audience that I want to make sure we get in. For Kent, what are the small investments or activities that Indiana does to engage low-income families?
Wow, well, I think I've mentioned some of them. I can't speak comprehensively to that. I think that you know, every program's got a different approach. I can speak from our own system. Even we have 10 centers, and they all kind of do different things. I know that IDOE, the Department of Education, designates schools as family-friendly, and there are certain standards around that. We know very strong, high-quality early childhood programs who have family advocates and others who are specifically tasked with engaging families and responding to them. And so I think those are very powerful examples. So I think I'd point to a lot of that. And again, I mentioned there's some evidence-based programs across the state that are doing great work, like Nurse-Family Partnership, Raising a Reader, many others. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge, I think, a little bit now, and the framework is going to help focus the state on where they should direct resources, and it will help us focus our resources.
Okay. Great. I have a question for Tom. Tom, you stated earlier in the presentation you were able to get agencies, family services, et cetera, involved. What role did they play, or how did they assist you in identifying needy children?
Yeah, so there's a long list of state agencies that we've partnered with, and we've established formal MOUs with them through this grant opportunity under the Early Learning Challenge. The Department of Children and Families, which is our protective service agencies, works with us in providing supportive care services, so supportive early education and care services to children. Likewise, we've been working with the Department of Public Health to coordinate services between early intervention and early education and care. And the Department of Housing and Community Development has allowed us to align that system of coordinated family and community engagement that I mentioned earlier with homeless families in shelters. So we have been very explicit about reaching out to those families and providing them with early learning opportunities through our family and community engagement efforts. And so the list goes on and on. We've worked with our Office of Refugees and Immigrants to ensure that we are reaching those populations, which are very difficult for us to typically reach even through our sister agencies in government. So it's been a really meaningful opportunity for us to reach what we've long identified as being our core high needs populations, but we haven't been able to necessarily capture them within our traditional services here at EEC. And because these are the populations that are served by these partners, and because we've adopted a common framework to approach these families and engage them and support them, it's really enabled us to expand beyond that 60,000 children that we provide a subsidy to here at EUC and get to multiples of that through these partnerships.
Okay, and Heather, I think
I wanted to add something to this in the following way. There's a set of resources that are coming out now with probably in the next couple of months that are worth taking a look at. They really offer, I think, an opportunity for us to not just learn from what's happening in the United States, but to learn what's happening more globally. The World Bank will be releasing sort of two related documents on early childhood in the next couple of months. One looks at what the World Bank has been doing within the countries in which they operate, which are a lot of the countries around the world. And the other is a look at the evidence we have on the longitudinal effects of early childhood intervention. Both of those are really worth taking a look at, in part because the bank, works toward twin goals of reducing poverty and trying to create shared prosperity around the globe. And what the documents show is really across the globe, people are now recognizing the incredible importance of early childhood for workforce preparation, family well-being, you name it. And also they're recognizing that there needs to be a very strong strand of family engagement within those early childhood efforts. So I recently had the opportunity to read those things and was struck, wow, they are not in a place that's that much different than where we are in terms of making arguments that federal agencies and state agencies need to work together, a lot of what I've been hearing today. So we don't typically think of ourselves as learning, maybe quite from this kind of set of actors, but I think in the next few years there's going to be a lot to learn and a lot to share around the globe.
Okay. Well, thank you.